Let me see. Hang on a second. Okay, how old are you?
I'm 22 years old.
Okay. And how many languages do you speak?
I speak three different languages.
Three different languages. Okay. And so, um, what is your language that you were born with learning, like from day one?
English was my
And
first language. Yeah.
okay. And so, um, do your parents both speak multiple languages?
So my mom, well, I'm, what's it called? I'm biracial. So my mom is white. She only speaks English. And then my dad was an immigrant from Hong Kong and he spoke Mandarin and Cantonese.
Mandarin and Cantonese. Okay.
Mhm.
So, usually, I mean, not to, so your mom is the one that's, taking care of you from day one, breastfeed, whatever, feeding you, bathing you. So it started off with English. How long did your dad incorporate Cantonese or Mandarin immediately, or did you wait to learn those languages?
It was pretty immediate, honestly, because I was his whole well, my grandparents on his side, so his parents, they don't speak English. So whenever we would like interact with them, or honestly, like his whole side of the family, it was always in Mandarin. So I kind of started picking it up by that like that way. And then my mom also sent me to like a bilingual preschool when I was two, and it was Mandarin and English. So that also like incorporated further into that. So, and then I took Chinese classes up until I was like a junior in high school. So I was able to like read and write and not just speak it.
Okay, um, so immediately you were learning two different languages at the same time,
Yeah.
basically. Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, let me ask you this one second. Mm, let's see. Okay, so let me see what this one says. I had it just right here. Here we go. Okay, so from the time you learned as a baby English, and then immediately because you had family that wasn't, they automatically are speaking to you in the language they know.
Yeah.
Um, and so at 2 years old, so you got that part for how do you remember? Okay, so if you think back as a like a 2 year old, or what you can like as far back as you can remember, what did you think? Like, what's the feeling that you had when you used the different languages?
English was always more like comfortable to me just because I mean, my parents like they spoke English like at home. It was more like when I was interacting with like other parts of the family that I would only speak in Mandarin. But I felt kind of like growing up, it was like a little intimidating speaking Mandarin in front of like my whole family because like my brother and I were like, at least in my dad's side of the family, we're the only like biracial children. All the other grandchildren are like full. So it was like a little intimidating speaking in front of them because learning it's a difficult language to learn with like the different tones and stuff like that because a different tone will completely change what word you're trying to say.
Right.
Um, so I think it was just like a lack of confidence that kind of kept me from like speaking it and like using it, but I would understand always a lot more than I would be able to speak.
Right. And then, okay, so, um, did, and I don't really think this is on here as far as a question. Okay, so to add to that, how did others react? So like when you were talking about it being intimidating because you and your brother were the only biracial that weren't full, I guess, is it Chinese? Or
Yeah.
no, yeah, Chinese. Okay, so if you guys are the only two that were biracial, and you felt that way, how did your family react to you when you used Mandarin or Cantonese?
It was just Mandarin. I unfortunately didn't like my family just because Cantonese is not like a universal, it's not as universal as Mandarin.
Right.
Like pretty much only people from Hong Kong use it. So it wasn't something that my family thought that I should learn or need, so they never taught me that. But with Mandarin, it was they were surprised, but in like a good way on like how well my brother and I would speak and like how well we were able to like read and write and all of that. And I guess it's and like even like strangers, like I would go to like the Asian mall with like my grandma and like go grocery shopping with her and stuff, and go out and about in like Chinatown because that's where she felt most comfortable and most familiar with things. um I guess like looking at us, you wouldn't assume that we're even Chinese, I guess. So from like strangers and stuff like that, whenever like my grandma would introduce me to them, they'd be really like surprised,
Oh, that
shocked
you
on
could speak.
that I could speak and read and write.
How does that make you feel?
I mean, it's a good feeling, like a little bit of an ego boost that people are like surprised that it's like I'm speaking well, but I also feel like it's like a different standard, if that makes you if it like makes sense. It's like for an American, you speak Mandarin very well, but not as like a native, if that makes sense.
Like you, yeah, exactly. I think it's like that. I'm learning that it seems to be like that with most language cultures, I guess you could say, like learning ASL, like fluency level, and just I feel like there's a lot of culture that goes into that too, like it's almost like, are you in the culture? Like, so um how do you think so does your mom know any Mandarin now?
No,
No. Really?
not at all.
When your mom's around, knowing that she only speaks English, um, and you still have family that only speaks Mandarin, right?
Yeah,
Okay. So how do they communicate?
through me.
Through through you. So
Yeah,
you're the interpreter.
yeah, my whole
How does
life.
that how does that feel?
um it's a little stressful sometimes, I would say, just because like I guess doing it at such a young age, it was like my vocabulary in neither languages as like a kid was very good. So it was difficult at first. Now it's not so much. I feel like I'm more like accustomed to it, but it's also not necessarily like I'm interpreting like word for word
Mm.
what they both say. It's never that. It's always just like the gist of what they said. Because it's also like my mom doesn't really get along with like my dad's side of the family. So there's not a lot of like interaction, at least not as much anymore. So it's kind of just like whenever I'm like relaying messages back and forth between them, it's very brief.
So does your dad do any of the relaying, or he kind
My
of
dad
tries to?
actually passed away when I was 4.
Oh God, I think you told me that too. I'm so
Oh, Jen,
sorry.
it's okay. No, it's okay. So like he wasn't really like around to like teach it and like use it at home, which I feel like was something that I was always missing growing up.
Yeah.
Like not being able to like speak Mandarin at home where I am the most. So it was like I went from I feel like being more fluent to being not, I mean, still kind of like still fluent, but like not as confident because I wasn't able to use it at home. And like as you grow up, you can only spend so much time with your family,
Hmm.
especially when like they're not immediate, they don't live with you.
Yeah.
So it's like the
So
vocab
you're
is still there,
Go
but the
ahead.
confidence of like speaking it like is not as strong as it was, I guess.
Do you feel like that your mom made an effort for you to have a relationship with that side of the family after your dad passed away?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
It was her whole idea for my brother and I to go to a bilingual preschool to continue Chinese classes up until we were in high school. So that, excuse me. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Um, it was like her idea. Like she wanted us to very much be able to communicate with them and to have, I guess, like building blocks to like one, like build a relationship with them and maintain it as we were older. And it's
Yeah.
also like a skill because she was kind of like, I mean, this is part of your culture, so you should be able to like learn it, read it, write it, speak it, like interact with it, you know?
Would you say that your feeling of um, wanting to be connected to that part of who you are has changed from, so let me start this way. So you were born, you have both your parents, your dad passes, and you're in Chinese school, right? At preschool. And so you're learning these things. And then from that point to the point that you started elementary school, would you say that your feeling about either language and using them changed at all from preschool to elementary school, if you can remember at any point in elementary?
Yeah, because I went to mainstream school, so there was no one else that spoke Mandarin really in the school that I was in, like not even like friends or anything like that. So it was like I went from going to a preschool where it was more like 75% of the time I was speaking in Mandarin and then like a little bit in English to like not communicating at all in Mandarin at school and only in English.
Did you have any sort of feeling about that?
Um, it was a little confusing at first, I would say, but I guess eventually like I got used to it and it was a little bit like less pressure because communicating in English is more it comes more natural to me as in like when like speaking in Mandarin, I feel like I'm thinking a lot more about what I say, how I say it.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think like with learning ASL, it's very much like word phrase, like, I have to think about the word and then put it together. Very like elementary, right? Like
Yeah.
really have to think before I even put the signs together. Um, okay, so then from that point, from elementary school level to high school, do you know, did you have any sort of change as far as like using it or the feeling of how you um, felt about using either language?
So I would say probably like late elementary school, like probably like third grade up until like middle school, like eighth grade, I was pretty confident and I felt really good about my like I guess my bilingualness, as in like my confidence in both of the languages that I speak, just because my mom had me in Chinese school 3 days out of the week. So I would go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for like 2 or 3 hours after like school. And there I felt like I was able to like use it all a lot more. And then also like taking classes, like I was expanding my vocabulary too. So it just all in all made me feel more like competent in the language and where like I didn't have to like think as much back then on like how to speak it, what to say, how to phrase it. It just came more naturally because I was using it more.
Did that have an effect on your English?
Sometimes, when I can't think of a word. It's I don't know. Sometimes in my head, I feel like the
Code
languages,
switch?
yeah, completely. Like I'll think of a word in Mandarin and I'll remember how to, or I'll think of a word in English or like a thought, and then I'm trying to think of the word to express it, but it comes out in Mandarin. I'm like, that is not the word that I was trying to say.
They call it code switching. A lot of that's so there's a friend in one of my classes at school that she knows like 7 languages, and when she can't think of a word, she'll be like pedal in Spanish, but she's also
Uh-huh.
signing, she's speaking Spanish, she's speaking English, like she's like multiple languages at one time, because
Yeah.
um what about uh what about any type of because I know a lot of kids. I have my ex-husband's daughter. She was born and both parents spoke Farsi. They both knew English, that they both spoke Farsi and in the home. And so she was fluent. And then when they separated and then she went to school, she was in school and everyone's speaking English and she didn't want to have an accent when she spoke English. So she like refused to speak any Farsi because she felt like that made her sound different. Did
Mhm.
you have any of that type of feeling?
If anything, I feel like it was the opposite. I didn't
Okay.
really like speaking English because it was giving me an American accent when I spoke Mandarin.
Okay.
I
I
didn't
like
like
that.
that. And I didn't
Okay.
like that. Like I could care
Okay.
less if I could care less if someone thought that like my English had an accent, but to me it hurt more to hear like my family or like other people say that my Mandarin had like you have like an English accent, you have an American accent when you speak, and I just did not want to hear that.
Okay. Okay. I like that. And do you think any of that had to do with like Mandarin have being a connection to your dad that passed away?
Yeah, honestly, I think I tried a lot harder when I was younger, to maintain that because I felt like it was like the only connection I kind of had to him and to like his family. So I kept it up to, I don't know, fill a
I mean,
void.
I do definitely believe that like the fact that you can communicate with that side of your family, for sure, that's like the biggest link that you have is the language for sure. I
Kind of
mean,
crazy too, because I have two younger cousins. They're like a couple years younger than me, and they're full Chinese. They don't speak a lick of Mandarin.
what?
Yeah.
You know what though? I'll tell you, both my kids are their dad speaks fluent Farsi because their dad was born in Iran.
Uh-huh.
Um, and neither one of my kids speak Farsi. Very sad because their mom's white and spoke
Yeah.
English, and I stayed at home. I mean, I did hair and stuff, but I stayed at home for many years taking care of my kids.
Hmm.
So, and I would want him to, but it was almost more work for him to, that they it's sort of sad. I think they probably regret that now that they didn't learn. Okay, so now let me ask you this. Hang on. I want to make sure my little guys aren't like get messed up. Because I forgot to charge them earlier. Uh Let me ask you this. So from the time that from high school now as a young adult, like, is there any feeling, any change from where you were in high school to how you feel about the language today?
I would say honestly, because I moved away from home and it's I haven't been really able to meet any other like there's not a big Chinese population in Long Beach. It's like a lot of Cambodian,
Okay.
Korean, Vietnamese, but like not necessarily like Chinese.
Yes.
And like because I don't live because I'm from San Francisco, so I moved like 6 hours away, like 400 miles away from home.
When did you
And
do that?
I moved here in 2019.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I learn something new every day about people, you know?
Yeah, so I definitely feel like me moving away from my family and like not really having anyone to interact with. Like I don't use the Mandarin when I'm down here at all.
That's sad.
It is, and like now when I go home, there's nothing close to like a language barrier, but I can feel myself like thinking a lot more and like like struggling sometimes to come up with like certain words when I'm talking to like my grandma or like my aunt or my uncle or something like that, like on my dad's side.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so you kind of your connection to the language is kind of like you have somewhat of a barrier. Probably too, there are a lot of Chinese people, but you don't know any of them,
Yeah.
you know? Um, Maybe a club at school or something could. You're like,
Jenna,
but girl,
I,
I know,
I
I
live
know.
in I live in Cambodia town in Long Beach.
I love it. Okay, we're not going to get into that, but let's see. So, what I want to know is, so when you speak now to your family and you say that you have a hard time pulling the words, like, do they notice it? Do they say anything about you and the culture? Like,
Um, I don't think they notice it too much. My grandma has kind of like said like a couple things here and there, but it's mainly just like, oh, like we don't talk as much as like I want to. Like I wish you would call me more and like we talk. And I'm just like, okay.
you're like,
Um,
I'm just trying to like see my boyfriend.
it's
And
that I'm
he's
just I'm just trying to be young and live my life, but there's been a couple times where her and I like are mid conversation and I'm trying to think of a word and I have to pull up like Google Translate or something like that
Funny.
because it's like on the tip of my tongue and like it doesn't even matter if I try to like describe it or even if I say it in English, she doesn't she's been in the US for probably like 50 years and like has not cared to learn English at all.
I mean, that's amazing that
I
she
know.
hasn't. I mean, being at like um being like having to interpret uh I found that because this, I mean, like I told you, this wasn't the first interview I did. That uh, it's not great for most people, most kids that grow up having to interpret for their parents and stuff and for their family. Like, it isn't a good feeling. Like, did you ever see the movie Coda?
I did.
The dot, she's an interpreter, right? So she's like
Yeah.
the connection between her family and the rest of the world, and like it gets old, you know. Like she's like, I don't want to
No,
do this.
that's kind of how I felt when I was younger. Like my grandma would love to go to San Francisco with like my brother and like my cousins. But the place that she would take us, like she wants to go to Fisherman's Wharf, like all the touristy places. The second that I found out that she wanted to go over there, like I would be so stressed out and so anxious because I knew that I was gonna have to be the one to like talk for her, to order, to ask for things. And it was
Makes sense.
stressful because I didn't want to feel like I was responsible for like everyone, you know?
Yeah, and as a kid, that's a hard position to be put in. What about, did you ever have to like go to doctors or like anything like that to translate?
No, my uncle would mainly do that with her, but I know there's been like a couple times where she's been sent like a bunch of stuff in the mail and she was having me like translate it for her.
You're just like, oh God, don't pay for that. That's a scam.
And no, she'd
Okay.
be like, Megan, what is this? And I'm like, it's a bill.
Oh, just throw it away. No, I'm just kidding. Um, Running out of time. How much time for unlimited? Okay, so I got a little bit more time left. Let me see if I what when okay, so let me ask you this. If you're out somewhere, you're with a group of people, no, let's say they don't know that they've never heard you speak Mandarin or whatever. What is has that happened to you? Like where all of a sudden you're speaking another language and they're like, wait, what?
All the time.
And what is that like?
Um, it's kind of like funny to me, honestly, because I don't know, it's funny to me in a way that it's just like you really don't think that I could speak another language like fluently? That's kind of
Yeah,
crazy, you know? Um, but I feel like it comes to a shock to most people when they don't really know me that well and they don't know that like half of my family doesn't speak English, so it's like how else am I supposed to communicate with them, you know?
yeah,
But definitely the shock factor of like other people happens like when we just don't know each other that well.
right, right. Okay. And so they're shocked, and then are they impressed or are they
Yes.
like
Yeah.
impressed? Yeah. Well, first of all, Mandarin's not an easy language. I know it's not. I don't know it, but I've been told that it's not. That in is it Hungarian or something? I forget. Like there's another language that's like supposed to be extremely difficult. There was like this savant guy that like learned the language in like 8 weeks or something. And people were like, he could like learn language just like reading a book. Like he's like, that was a really hard one. It took me about 2 months. You know what a savant is, like someone that's
God, I
super,
wish I was him.
yeah,
Oh,
right. Um, what do you think about people that are English speakers and let's say they're not a part of Chinese culture and they're not from there or their parents aren't from there. How do you feel when you hear someone like, let's say me, and I just came speaking Mandarin? Like, what do you think of that?
I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing or anything like that. Like I would encourage more people to like learn it. It's a really hard language, but I mean, um, It's really useful. It's like what, the number one most spoken language in the world or something like that.
Do you think
Um,
they sound funny?
I do.
You do?
I think that I do think that when Americans try to speak Mandarin, like the accent, it's like so when they try to say certain words, there's like not necessarily like rolling R's, but like it's in the throat kind of. I don't
Give me
really
an
know
ex
how,
can you give me an example?
like people will, let me think. People will be like, I could ask you, oh, like what time do you have class? Like 你什么时候去上学? But people when I hear other people say it, it's like 你什么时候去上学? Like it's very it doesn't flow.
Right.
You know, it's very choppy and like Mandarin is supposed it flows, I feel like really nicely.
Hmm. I get
But
exactly what you're saying.
but I don't get like offended or anything like that. As long as they're using it correctly, I don't really have an issue with it. But it's more
So
like when I
have
see,
you,
huh?
what were you gonna say? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, you're good. When I hear people like speaking it correctly, I don't really, me personally, like I don't feel like I'm not gatekeeping it or anything like that. So I don't feel like it's my responsibility to go and correct them. Because it's also like I never know what other people's levels are, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. Like if you're just
Yeah.
starting out and you're speaking, you're making mistakes, like I don't want to go and correct you and make you feel like shit. But there are some people that try to say that they're like fluent, and then when they talk, I'm like, no, the fuck, you're not.
Hmm.
So
Have you ever been somewhere and you were speaking Mandarin and maybe saying something that you didn't want anyone else to hear, and someone turned around and like starts speaking and you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know they knew.
that's never happened to me, but like I've never been the one to be talking to someone about someone else and like but I have been the person that like turned and started speaking Mandarin back.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you like? I mean, what happened?
It was like this was like back in high school. I took my grandma like grocery shopping to this like specific market that she likes to go to. We separated and I was like at the checkout line. Um, something I think like I was paying or something like that, but it was taking me a while because like I couldn't find like all the all of like the change and like the ones that I needed. So it was taking a minute. I felt bad, but the cashier had said something to the other one like, oh, this girl in Mandarin, like, oh, this girl like probably doesn't even have enough to like cover like her entire like bill or whatever. She's probably gonna ask me to go put some things back. And I just looked at her and I said like in Mandarin back and I was like, you can go ahead and keep the change. And I grabbed my bag and I walked out.
Oh, I love that.
Because it was kind of just like I never want
Yeah.
to, because that's been done to me. I never want to assume that other people either don't speak it or don't understand it. Because like just because you don't speak it doesn't mean that like you don't understand it. Like a lot of people will like understand a language, but it's like more difficult for them to speak it. So
Right. I mean, I was married to someone for many years who I was around Farsi for so many years that um, I mean, I can count in Farsi. I can say a lot of bad words in Farsi. I can say hello, how are you? But I understand a lot. I
yeah,
probably don't as much anymore because it's been like a decade since we've been together. But I remember being at the doctor once, and these people were talking they were speaking Farsi together, and they weren't talking about me. They were talking badly about the doctor, like, oh, they're taking forever, and they're just saying all sorts of bad words and shit. And so I was just sitting there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting there, and finally I turn around, I go, I just asked them, hey, how are you in Farsi, like, you know, and they just looked at me like, whoa. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
you should be careful who you talk about and what you're talking about around other people. You never know,
I feel like
right?
we're in the 21st century, like learning languages is literally at our fingertips. Like I could download Duolingo and just start like learning a language, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that's so like gate kept anymore, if that
Well, you
makes sense.
know, most people and we in this language class that I'm in linguistics, like most people know at least like four languages
Yeah.
because you have so many different like versions of language going on in other countries, in the Philippines and in in Africa, like there's you have to in order to communicate with people of other tribes and other communities. Like United States is really like it's really we're not the norm to be monolingual, to only speak one language, or it's I only know English fluently. I mean, my boyfriend knows Spanish and English, or English and then Spanish, and he's super white, but his parents was forced to, and he won't even he's not comfortable speaking it because he speaks it at work and stuff, but like outside of that, it's hard for him because he doesn't he has to think. Plus,
Yeah.
he's like, dude, I don't want everybody to know that I know, like sometimes it's best to just not have everybody know. Like when
Yeah.
you live around people and yeah, I don't know. Okay, so I think let me see if that's it. I think I pretty much covered everything and some. Do you and your brother speak? You have a brother, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys speak Mandarin together?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually started taking Mandarin again up in college. So him and I have been like practicing more together because he stopped taking Mandarin classes a lot earlier than I did because he just didn't as a kid. Like he was being stubborn. It's just something that he just did not want to do anymore. My mom was tired of fighting with him about it. So she like let him like drop it while I continued. And he actually lost it almost completely.
Wow.
And
Now
I
he
think
sort of has a passion almost,
he
like
almost
one.
does because he felt almost embarrassed when he lost it because then like I was having to translate for him as well. And that's when he was kind of like, okay, like I need to get my shit together
Good. That's
and
awesome.
learn the language again because that's just embarrassing that I can't talk to my own grandmother anymore, you know?
Yep. Okay, so I think my thing's going to end here in like less than a minute, but I did get everything. And I will have you sign, I'll send you over so you can sign the release and stuff. But I don't have to use the video. I do have to transcribe though. So that's pretty
That's
much
totally
it.
fine. Yeah, send over whatever you need and I'll go ahead and I'll sign it for you.
Thank you, Megan. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah, of
All right.
course.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Jen.